people are really receptive to hearing stories that they can relate to. And so today we're going to be sharing some stories with you to paint a picture of what it's like to be a youth activist. Also, we have a table in the expo hall, so come to our table. There's some cool stuff you can win. We have a little game. It's really awesome. And also, we have a workshop tomorrow at noon in the same room. Adult allies and youth activists are welcome, so write it down because it's really cool and fun, and you guys should all come to it. And we're very thankful that you attended this panel, but tomorrow, we want to see you. So come show your support and learn something new. Okay, so I'm going to start by sharing with you my journey to becoming an animal activist, and then my journey to becoming whatever I am today. I was born into a family with two enormous rescue dogs named Shuka and Heidi, and they taught me some extremely important lessons when I was an infant, such as protection and loyalty and unconditional love. My parents divorced when I was about 4 years old, and Heidi passed away around the same time, so I was left with Shuka as a primary source of emotional support for me. And I think I've got a picture. There's me with the cow as a baby, and this is Shuka. He was like my intro to caring about animals. Between the ages of 5 and 7, I fell into kind of an intense depression and struggled with the separation of my parents. Shuka was kept by my mother in the divorce, so naturally I was more comfortable at her home than my dad's home because animals were always a primary source of emotional support for me. And when I was about 8, my mom and I adopted a companion for Shuka named Lucas, and he's here somewhere. Oh, here. And there's Lucas. I remember my dogs being one of the very few things that brought me genuine joy as a child. So as I grew into a teen, my relationship only grew fonder. My mom and I spent almost all of our free time rescuing and fostering dogs, and it was really life-changing at the time. The suffering I saw in the dogs made me think critically about the experience of all animals, especially food animals, and I eventually went vegan at age 15. When I started high school, I was extremely bored and could not stay engaged in class. Nothing seemed like a challenge. But at the beginning of my sophomore year, I joined the Animal Advocacy Club at my school. Not only was this my first experience feeling challenged as a student, but it was my first experience being encouraged to think critically about issues in the world that were affecting me and my peers. Claire Howe, now the executive director of the Raven Corps, but at the time a humane educator with heart, was the adult leader of the Animal Advocacy Club at my school. She was the first adult to treat me as a student as though she actually wanted to hear what I thought and why I thought that. It was extremely empowering and new for me at the time, and Claire educated us about the foundational topics of animal rights specifically. She hosted taste tests, and we started an AR book club of sort, and she introduced us to some of the more controversial ideas within the movement and gave us a really well-rounded view of like what it means to be involved. Not only was it extremely educationally enlightening at the time, but the way she treated us was actually life-changing. It was really the first time I had been treated like a complex, opinionated, or justified human being by an adult person. And this was our first year that we were together as, I don't even remember what we were called at that point because it was just a high school club, but that was before our first time coming to this conference 4 years ago. So Claire taught me an immense amount of information, but she went about it as an exchange of learning. She was aware that we as people had vulnerable and unique input and reasoning behind the opinions we formed, and we exchanged stories and learned from each other. It wasn't a student-teacher dynamic, and if it had been, it would have likely just thrown off the power imbalance and not enough to not allow us to share things genuinely, and it wouldn't have been productive for the adults or the students involved. I think that that was us at our separate time at this conference. One of my fondest memories from that year was when we discussed animal liberation versus animal welfare as controversial ideas within the movement. To that version of myself, complete and exact consistency between my beliefs and what I advocated for was the most important thing. I remember Claire thoughtfully questioning why I was so set on the idea of animal liberation as the objective of my advocacy. I was so blinded by anger about the treatment of animals and resentment toward the people who neglected to inform me of it sooner that I didn't even have the ability to truly consider what was the most effective. In that moment and many others, Claire planted seeds in me as a young and ideologically vulnerable student that changed me. These seeds had held vital messages that I wasn't receiving anywhere else at the time. They said, the opinions you hold are valid, you hold them for a reason, never forget to examine those reasons. Question yourself and those around you, consider all perspectives of a given situation, and the seed that I continue to hold dearest to my heart. Your innermost convictions and beliefs don't always have to align perfectly with what you publicly advocate for or against. Have compassion for all as an activist. Consider what is truly most effective, meaningful to you, and positively impacts all living things on this planet with equity. I didn't immediately absorb that seed because it was very complex for a 14 or 15-year-old child to understand at that time. So I was a stereotypical tunnel-visioned animal activist exclusively for about 2 years until that message and many others truly settled within myself. And this was about 2017 with Congressman Earl Blumenauer. Cool guy. Okay. I was already becoming increasingly inclined to take a more compassionate approach to activism, but the results of the 2016 presidential election completely destroyed my semi-youthful and optimistic outlook. I had turned 18 2 weeks before the presidential election and was so thrilled to vote for the first female president. Clearly, that's not at all what happened, and I was extremely hurt. It felt as though all of the productive and compassionate, empowering strides made by the movements I was a part of and respected most were all discounted and gone forever. I felt personally attacked and disrespected by my fellow U.S. citizens who had contributed to this evil lapse in power. As a young, developing activist, the results of the election made it clear to me that we were taking huge steps back, and repairing this much damage felt nearly impossible and not even worth it. I graduated high school in 2017 and decided to spend some time across the world to distance myself from the destructive frustration and resentment I felt towards my country. I took a gap year to volunteer at a baboon rehabilitation center in South Africa. And since animals were always my primary source of emotional support and learning, it was a very enlightening experience for me, and it was very healing to be around that many animals. It was kind of a challenging experience, and it made me question some of my innermost beliefs, but ultimately influenced me to re-involve myself back in advocacy. Not animal advocacy in any traditional sense of the term. It was clear to me that unity, efficacy, and equity must be the priorities. I was determined to help establish a new unified movement of all types of people to simply make the world a more healthy and compassionate place. I'm extremely passionate about racial equity, environmental justice, and animal welfare. Those were my primary motivators for staying involved in advocacy rather than abandoning it completely due to the seemingly unbearable feeling of hopelessness. So since Claire was experiencing similar realizations at the time, we and the other co-founders of the organization thoughtfully redesigned .org to unify movements through the empowerment of young activists. By this time, in early 2018, our little high school animal advocacy club had grown into an official 501c3 nonprofit called Youth for the Voiceless, which you saw up here when our organization used to be called Youth for the Voiceless. After my return from South Africa and during our parallel realizations about the efficacy of single-issue animal activism, we decided to entirely revamp the organization. the name Youth for the Voiceless did not complement our developing ideas around equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So ultimately, we did away with the name along with most of the programming and decided to design what is now called the Raven Corps. We created this as an inherently inclusive organization and put lots of careful consideration into what that truly means in regards to youth activism. The reason we decided on the name the Raven Corps is because ravens are a typically misunderstood animal in the eyes of mainstream society. There are many parallels to draw between young people and ravens, and the most powerful misconceptions that we share with them are that we're like unintelligent, unmotivated, conniving, selfish, all of those stereotypes that we experience. Ravens have adapted to survive in such a human-dominated urban world, and they're extremely smart and loyal to each other. The same thing could be said for young people today, and this shared lack of respect has encouraged us to forge our own spaces for vitality and creative development as ravens and young people. The name change was also a great way to pay tribute to our roots as a conventional animal rights organization and our tradition to a more meaningfully holistic organization focused on equity. We believe in young people, not just as the future, but as bright and innovative activists in the here and now. By building community and providing young activists, also called ravens, with the resources, tools, and guidance to create personalized advocacy projects for their communities, also called operations, we're forging a new movement focused on building a better world one bite at a time. Our ravens share a commitment to improving our food system by promoting the benefits of a plant-based diet, and together we're tackling some of the biggest issues of our time. Problems like climate change, animal welfare, environmental racism, and many more. Our ever-growing network of young activists understand that all life is connected and educate others on the need to think holistically about how our food choices impact living things. With this thoughtful design, young activists are allowed to feel empowered, angry, and heard, all within the umbrella of a chosen topic or focus that they're passionate about within their own community. This program allows young people to try different types of activism and enjoy the resources developed by other activists with a range of experience. This organization has allowed me to feel truly accepted and respected by fellow activists. I'm extremely thankful for that. I care very deeply about animal rights specifically, and I wish that I felt more comfortable and morally justified within the movement that it is today. The ARME2 movement, the habitual tokenization of people of color, and the overall attitude toward women have been factors that have almost entirely driven me away. It is important for me to note that women have been the most powerful force in this movement and many others, so as a young female activist, witnessing and experiencing misogyny and harassment accompanied by a general lack of respect and tremendous lack of women in leadership positions felt to me extremely problematic and infuriating, and it still does, although we are making progress. Do not advocate for compassion for all unless you mean for all. This means no tokenizing people of color. Instead, get innovative and consider a more meaningful engagement with communities that you are not a part of. Please do not be inappropriate or disrespectful to women, and I'm not going to explain what that means because we should all be thinking critically about it and acting on it on a daily basis. Now, I know that's a lot, so I'm going to boil it down simply and straightforward in a nicely configured slide for you. Note-taking is respected, just saying. So, these are my tips for adult activists conversing with young activists. When you are speaking to a young activist, don't forget that it's a two-way street. Try to consider the ratio of who's participating in the conversation, ask meaningful questions, and don't preach. Just remember that we are equal, and that's what it boils down to, and you don't necessarily need to pass on your entire life's wisdom to us. Just a friendly reminder. Please don't tell us that we revive your hope in our generation or anything along those lines. I know it may seem like a really kind and encouraging compliment for us to receive, but it's actually kind of a backhanded compliment from our perspective as young activists, because not only are we completely capable in the here and now, but we're also not the only responsible party for cleaning up the trash storm that has been caused by past generations. So we're all in the same position, and it is not our responsibility to clean up this mess just because we were born more recently. Okay, and also related to this second tip here, please don't negatively stereotype young generations for any reason, but especially related to technology. Technology is always innovating and improving and changing, and just because we use the most recent technology doesn't mean that we are like some different species. Like it's really, it's okay. Like just like I'm using an iPad for this presentation, but it's like not groundbreaking, I promise. Okay. When creating a new organization, number 3 now, or reconfiguring opportunities within an existing organization, meaningfully make space for young activists to get involved. It doesn't have to be a mentorship program or some like educational resource development committee. Just talk to young people about how they'd like to participate in your organization and think critically about how they could bring a unique perspective to your collective efforts. Engage in meaningful conversations with us. Like I've said before, there's definitely wisdom to be gained from us because we have a unique perspective. Okay. So now we've got some tips for my fellow young activists. Glad to see you guys here, but you already know what's up, so I'm not gonna like preach or anything at you. I'm going to use an example of an operation that I completed with the Raven Corps in spring, which was a climate strike that I organized where over 2,000 students attended. It was extremely challenging to plan because it was citywide and we had no idea how many people would show up because there's no easy way to set up like an RSVP system for that. So it was very stressful and challenging to plan. But I was lucky enough to be connected with other young activists who were passionate about similar things through the Raven Corps. And that network of young activists was able to reach almost every public and private high school in Portland. And that's why there were so many attendees at the climate strike, was because of our network of young people who all went to different schools but were connected through similar forms of activism. So a tip that I would have for young people who are planning a really large event like this is just delegate responsibility to other trusted young activists. We all have those connections, and if you don't, reach out to the Raven Corps because we can likely connect you to another young activist in your area who's passionate about similar things. With that particular event, we had weekly meetings at the Portland Raven Corps office to catch each other up on progress we had made throughout the week on planning this strike, and that made it really, really simple and easy to delegate responsibility because we were meeting on a regular basis. Number 2, don't be afraid to play the youth card. Young activists out there, you know what I'm talking about, because sometimes adults don't realize that you are already like smart and bright and independent and don't really need their help anyway. But if you do need a particular adult's help, don't be afraid to play that whole, please, it's for the children angle. It can be really productive sometimes. It's really helpful in my experience. And so this is Commissioner Hardesty. When I planned the climate strike, she was one of the only commissioners who was willing to promote the event or help us with finances or planning because we wanted to hold a huge rally in front of City Hall. And she helped us make that rally happen with over 2,000 young people. So shout out to Commissioner Hardesty for being awesome. And that's me speaking at the climate strike. But let's go back. Okay. Don't be afraid to play the youth card. We know this. And here's a broader tip for young activists out there. Don't let yourself fall into the same perspective that adults have of you as a youth activist. They may say patronizing things to you, offer to pass on their entire life's wisdom to you, or my favorite, ask you a question, and then without even allowing you the chance to answer, just like answer it for themselves personally, just instead of listening to your answer. Just ignore that. Don't let their inability to take your perspective seriously cause you to change your perspective or stop sharing it. They might not be listening, but other youth activists are, and other genuine adult allies are, and we agree with you, and we're here to support you. Last one, but to me, very most important, right there, don't get involved in the wrong organization just because you want to get involved. There are certain organizations out there that see a young activist, and they want to recruit you with the intention of tokenizing you or enrolling you in their inconsiderate, ineffective, and often extremely destructive agendas or campaigns. It's unfortunate, but those people do exist, and the animal rights movement is definitely not exempt from this idea. Value your worth enough as an activist to ignore these invitations to absorb toxic agendas. Truly think about what is effective, and choose a form of advocacy that's positive and embraces you and all living things, without the expense of another. Super important. Put yourself in the shoes of people you are directly engaging with, and consider whether or not you would be receptive to that type of advocacy. And if the answer is no, then stop doing it. Thank you. Woo!
Hi, I'm Cami Hoffman, and I lead the San Diego Raven Corps. And even this time, a couple years ago, I was pretty nervous to speak my truth in front of strangers, so it's pretty surreal to be up here today, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. And I hope that in sharing the story of how that came to be, you all feel inspired, because we are all certainly capable of change. All right, so I'll start with this. I have two brothers. One of them is here today. Looks like he might have regretted being in that picture. And so I have two brothers, and we used to go rock climbing a lot. And after rock climbing practice, we would always go to places like In-N-Out and Panda Express, like on a weekly basis. Our diets were essentially like processed animal products with a small side of processed plants. And none of us ever dreamed of going vegan. We probably had no idea what that word meant back then. Yet today, all three of the kids in that picture are vegan and active for the animals. And as I was saying, my older brother Eddie, he's up here today. He's actually here as part of the Raven Corps with his girlfriend Haley, who's right behind him. But I'll backtrack a little bit. A year or so after we took a break from rock climbing, I ended up going pescatarian because of a PETA booth that turned me off of consuming the flesh of land animals. And like I said, I never ever imagined that I would go vegan, yet looking back now, it seems like that was inevitable. So in my freshman year of high school, I started becoming more invested in animal rights issues, namely from seeing documentaries like the ones up there, Blackfish, Tidy the Elephant Outlaw, Cove, all highly recommend if you haven't seen any of those. And I was getting frustrated by the injustice that was being done to these magnificent, innocent creatures. Yet, even during that time, I remained ignorant. And during that time when my passion for animals was peaking, I was remaining ignorant to the animals that I was exploiting every single day just by consuming animal products. And I remember one day, my friend told me she was thinking about going vegan, and I specifically remember telling her, that's a little bit much. Like, I thought I could never give up eggs. I could never give up dairy. Like, I could just never do that. And I just immediately felt the need to justify my own eating habits because I think I knew deep down that my eating habits were far from ethical, but I was just resistant to making that change. Yet less than a year later, I ended up going vegan. And if I were to put a date on what sparked that change, I'd say it was probably a few summers ago while I was in Florida with some family friends. So one night we ate out at this nice beachside restaurant and I ordered myself a pasta dish with shrimp. And I was so proud of myself because I was such a picky eater and I had never tried shrimp before. And I even took a picture of the dish and sent it to my mom, who was still back in California, just to prove to her that I was out in Florida breaking boundaries and crazy. And I actually still have the picture as proof, which is kind of disturbing to look back on. But so the next day we visited an aquarium, and even then I had mixed feelings about that. But one of the family friends that I had dinner with the night before, I'll just call him John, I heard him say, as we were walking through the aquarium, I heard him say, "That's what we had for dinner last night." And when I looked at the little shrimp that he was referring to, I just remember instantly feeling my stomach drop. And I was immediately filled with guilt, regret, and uncertainty. Because I just thought, did I really just eat who knows how many of those little guys the other night, just in my pasta dish? And is that really okay? I just didn't know. And from then on, I started becoming more and more aware of the food on my plate, or quote unquote food on my plate. Like, I would just look at products like eggs and dairy and all those poor fishes and think, is this really ethical? And after staying up late nights in Florida hotels doing some research, I realized that the answer is no. It's not ethical to unnecessarily consume animals or their secretions. And by the time I got home, I was fully committed to going vegan, and I had been talking with my mom the whole time, and she was actually on board also. And at that point, my two brothers were still consuming animal flesh because, like me, they had no intention of going vegan. Yet, after days, weeks of my mom and I watching all these vegan documentaries and both of them conveniently being in the house while we were watching them, they did eventually see the light, and Eddie was actually getting interested in like breed-specific legislation in pit bulls, and so he was no doubt growing more aware of like the hypocrisy of loving one but eating the other and that whole thing. Now, this is a photo that Eddie took at one of his first pig vigils in Los Angeles with the Save Movement. And this, so he had started to make the transition to a vegan diet shortly before going to this vigil. And when he and Haley came with me to this pig vigil, they both knew that there was no turning back after that. And really, how could you go back to eating animals after seeing something like that? Like how they're really being treated. Me, my mom, and my two brothers, and Haley, we all made that change to going vegan, and we hardly even had to speak to each other to convince each other of it, because there's really only so much you can say about the fact that at the end of the day, it's wrong to exploit and kill these animals when we don't have to. Now, before I started going to vigils or protests, or really any form of activism, I volunteered at farm animal sanctuaries like Sail Ranch Sanctuary up in Temecula, well, I guess over in Temecula, geographically challenged here. And these places, they kept me sane during a time when the true horrors of the world were becoming all too apparent, a lot like what Melissa was going through. And during that time, my mom, she showed me this youth activism group, and she said it was right up my alley. And yeah, I want to preface this by saying that I love my mom. She supports me in like everything that I do. But I think during that time I was probably a little preoccupied or something, because I kind of just disregarded it. I was like, wow, cool, thanks mom, whatever, you know. But then fast forward a year or so, and I find this group called the Raven Corps on Instagram, and I showed it to my mom, and she was like, are you joking? It was the same exact group that she had shown me however long ago, and I guess I just wasn't receptive to it at the time. But having found it on my own, I was really struck by the originality of the group and the inclusivity, because it's a group that truly is powered by youth, not just on the surface. And there's also all these great adults that support us, like Claire and Seth and Will, who I just met today. And this youth power has been more than apparent during my experience as a lead Raven. So our San Diego Corps, we've done a few operations since the start of this year, and they've mostly been table outreach style, where we set up a table and we have a certain issue or topic in mind that we want to raise awareness about. So pictured here, we've done, I'll start on the top left and just go down. So we've done dairy outreach, where we have free plant milk samples, and we show the amount of water needed to produce dairy versus the plant milks. And we just recently did free Light Life hot dog samples for National Hot Dog Day. If you watch a video about factory farming, you get a free hot dog. We've tabled at Earth festivals. We've educated people on the plastic pollution in the ocean, how it comes from the fishing industry. And we've also done a few beach cleanups, and we've got hopefully a documentary screening in the works. We're really trying to push that. But I think by far the most powerful presence we've had is from tabling at youth climate strikes. So far we've been present at 2 climate strikes, and at each one I was able to talk about animal agriculture and its impact on our planet. And at each one we were the only ones there that were addressing that issue. And it's just amazing to get so much feedback from people afterwards, because there would be people who are grateful that we brought up the topic, because no one ever talks about it, and there's people that want to know questions and just want to learn more. And it's just really inspiring, because I think too often we don't give people the benefit of the doubt. We assume the worst, but I found that when we open our hearts and be compassionate, make ourselves vulnerable, people can really surprise you. Now, the 2 most important things I have for the adult allies in the room is, when it comes to supporting youth activists, would be to listen and appreciate. Now, they're both pretty self-explanatory, but I'll go ahead and explain them anyway. So for listening, just treat us as equals, because really we absolutely are. In activism, we all travel down the same or similar journey. We all learn something, we all become inspired, and we become aware of an injustice, and we want to take action. So we're really not that different in that sense. And simply realizing this and giving youth a space to be heard and taking them seriously just as you would with any other person is really powerful. And appreciate youth activists in your community. Because activism is hard at any age, but especially so for youth activists, in my opinion, because we're still trying to figure out where we stand in this world, a lot of these activists may still be dependent on an unsupportive family, and it's just really important for fellow activists to provide the support that they might not otherwise be getting at home. And also, most youth activists have probably had to deal with the terrifying reality of the state of our planet and the fact that we might not even get a future if we continue down this path of environmental destruction. So in a sense, we are literally fighting for our lives by doing activism. And frankly, it's hard for our generation to hold on to hope, much less to grab that hope and get out on the streets and say something about it. So once you all go home, please just give any youth activists a pat on the back, because they could probably use it. And here is, this looks a little confusing. It was originally nice and animated, but stuff got mixed up in the downloading process. So this is well, I'll explain this in a minute. So something that's important to remember for all activists, regardless of your age, is that veganism is not necessarily something that you arrive at, it's something that you're constantly working towards. And it's about causing as little harm as you can. And it's also, in my opinion, about unconditional compassion. Because too often in this movement, we lose sight of our compassion. We'll say we have compassion for all beings, then we'll turn around and, for example, wish a slaughterhouse worker to death, or something like that. And I think this comes out in social media especially, because we have a mask to hide behind. And I logged onto my Instagram to find an example of this, and it took about 2 seconds. So this is the example I put up here. It's a photo of Cardi B wearing fur, and bear in mind the photo was posted by an animal rights activist. And I don't know if y'all can see those comments, but there's disgusting comes up an awful lot, vile, heartless, good for nothing, hood rat, lots of not nice comments being hurled at this person. Now raise your hand if you've ever seen language like this coming from any activist you know. Yeah, it's a pretty good amount of people. So it goes without saying that this movement, it is founded on compassion. Like we believe that all beings deserve respect and compassion and empathy, but understandably we tend to forget to extend this feeling to humans. And this final comment that I put up in the center, I found especially ironic because so it says, "You are a stupid and horrible person. You really are a despicable being. You do not have the word compassion in your brain." And I just find that a little bit ironic because they're accusing Cardi B of having no compassion while hurling insults at her that also appear to lack compassion. So, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I do completely understand where all the anger and frustration is coming from. I feel it too, but it's not compassion for all beings that's being shown here. This is selective compassion, and it's the very thing that we're fighting against in this movement. And now I just want y'all to take a second and imagine that you're in Cardi B's place, which I know is kind of a lofty ask, but bear with me here. So imagine someone calling you a vile, heartless, good-for-nothing trash bag, disgusting, self-absorbed, a despicable being. And how would you feel being called those things? Would you get angry and turn the other cheek, or feel guilty and change your ways? Now, I'd like you to imagine a time when you did something that was motivated purely by guilt. It doesn't feel that great, and it's definitely not sustainable in the long term. Now, what is sustainable is genuine compassion. We can hope that Cardi B might one day find her compassion and maybe, make a change based on the guilt. She could find her compassion, but wouldn't it be more effective to approach our activism with compassion as the baseline rather than guilting and shaming? And so basically what I'm saying is be kind to every kind, with humans included. Because I think it's important that we try to bring this out in ourselves and others, and to empower and inspire one another to create change in this way. All right, so that was a lot of stuff that I just threw at you all. So if there's anything that I do want you to glean from what I just said and the experiences I've shared, it's these main points. Firstly, to the adult allies, I'll reiterate what I just said. So listen and appreciate, because if you really want to bring out the youth voices in your community, make sure you give them a space and a place to be heard. And secondly, to all activists, whether you're 8 years old or 80 years old, keep hold of your compassion. Approach fellow people with the respect and empathy that you believe all other beings deserve, and this will amplify your message so much. And lastly, if I've learned anything from my own life story, it's that empowering people with knowledge and embracing them with compassion are the keys to change. Thank you.
Hello. So, hey guys, my name's Sophia. I'm the lead raven for the first international chapter of Ravenclaw in Adelaide, Australia. So I'm just going to start off with a little geographical lesson. So for those of us who are geographically challenged, myself included, Australia's that one there in the red circle, and I'm where the star is. So yeah, learning. All right. So, back to the start. So, I'm just going to give you a bit of background info about myself. So, I'm a vegan on Christmas Day of 2017, which was basically the most inconvenient thing ever. Spent the whole time eating fruit salad and avoiding jet flares from my many disapproving family members, which I'm sure we can all relate to at some point in our lives. You'd think they'd be a bit more understanding, but it was literally like I just told them I was doing hard drugs. So, yeah. Suddenly everyone in my family became an expert in the field of health sciences and nutrition, and wanted to warn me of the weak and anemic fate that basically lay ahead. And the Hamlin family is definitely not the epitome of health. Most of the advice given that day was voiced with a party pie or a slice of cake in hand. So, yeah, not very valid, but, everyone has the right to their own opinion, I suppose. So, enough bagging my family. The story I would like to get into is my life before this very underwhelming Christmas Day during 2017. Brutal changed. So I'll start by winding back the clock about 9 years. So, I was about 9 years old when I was first invited to help out on my grandparents' neighbour's dairy farm in Lake Alexandria in Australia. Despite being considered small on the scale of conventional farming, the 200-cow dairy farm was just this never-ending expanse of green pastures, happy people and animals in my eyes. And it's safe to say that from the moment I set foot on that property, I was hooked. I think I especially fell in love with being a kid, taking on the responsibilities of a big person, being able to put all the cups on the cows, move the herd, and then sit down to a big communal breakfast of microwave scrambled eggs, buttered toast, and a glass of unpasteurised milk after the morning shift. I was kind of like adulting prematurely. It felt really cool. But I guess the aspect of farm life that I was most drawn to was the animals.
naturally. And being a dairy farm, the standout amongst an already stellar cast of animals and people was, of course, the Holstein Friesian dairy cows. At the time, these huge black and white animals were almost twice my size, but they were so gentle and timid in nature. And whilst I enjoyed their company, it was apparent from the get-go that the feeling was not always mutual. They were very fearful of the world around them. Something as an animal lover I tried not to acknowledge. So the calm after a very enjoyable storm of milking and moving the herd was feeding time. So my colleague and I would head out in an old ute listening to the only functioning radio station in Lake Alexandrina, accompanied by a couple of dogs with enough milk to feed between 10 and 15 hungry mouths depending on the time of year. I always remember on arrival at the feedlots, all the calves would gather to the fence line, bellowing for a feed, and like their adult counterparts, they were so gentle in nature, but it was their outgoing and lively spirit that really set them apart. I often wondered how the dairy herd, who had once just been as lively and outgoing as their offspring, had become so withdrawn and fearful of the world around them. It was a question I found myself dwelling upon quite often. It was as if something, or rather someone, had changed them. Over the years, my visits became more frequent and my skills and abilities on the farm became more advanced, and my passion for this field of work was undeniable. At the age of 12, I knew I was going to be a dairy farmer. So, I applied to go to an agricultural high school because of this, and I took part in a youth dairy heifer camp where I learned to lead and prepare heifers for competition. I was really stoked when I came first in the leading competition at the end of the 4-day camp, and it felt like I'd found something I was really good at and something that I enjoyed. In 2016, my passion for farm life was finally called into question, prompted by an innocent visit to a friend's house who just happened to be a vegan, which at the time I thought was pretty weird. So this is a picture of my weird vegan friend, Ella. After discovering a pamphlet regarding the dairy industry in her house, I found myself pretty shocked and angry reading of the supposed cruelty that took place within the industry. I'm pretty sure I felt like an attack had been sort of placed on one of the biggest aspects of my life at the time. And as a result, I told her the brochure was basically well-composed crap produced by an organisation that knew very little about the dairy industry. And the conversation subsided, but my stream of thought definitely didn't. I suppose I'd sort of known, whether it be subconsciously or consciously, that these practices took place, but until that moment had never openly questioned their morality, because as far as I knew, they were necessary practices that had to take place. So, on returning to the dairy following that incident, my view on the farm had basically shifted completely. Feeding the calves, which had once been one of my favourite things to do, was now impossible to do without recognising that at least half of them would shortly find themselves in the back of the truck, destined for the slaughterhouse. Feeding and nursing the individual calves who were likely to die from their symptoms was a major challenge, as I now knew full well that they didn't have to. Even the artificial insemination, which had once been fascinating, was now only a reminder of the fact that in 9 months' time, a mother would have to endure the pain of having her calf torn from her yet again. It just seems like this cruel, repetitive cycle that only an electric prod or blade was going to free her from. And worse than her undignified death was the fact that the daughters she had not been fortunate enough to know would then take her place in the cycle. The The daughters I knew she had bellowed for, scaled fences for, and chased cars for. And it just seemed so pointless, you know? All this pain for what? The milk on someone's cereal, the garnish to a pot of pasta, cholesterol. So, to truly love and respect another living being, human or non-human, is to act in favour of them, despite your own desires. I really loved dairy farming, and it felt like something that I'd become really good at. But knowing that my passion was causing such immense pain to the animals, that I wanted nothing more than to act in favour of, was something that I couldn't really push to the back of my mind any longer. And at this point, or soon after, I actually gave up dairy farming for good. So, fast track to where we are now. I've been clean of dairy farming for at least 2 years. And during this time, I also decided to pursue a vegan lifestyle for ethical and environmental reasons, with health just being a bonus. Regardless of my stance, I still have a lot of time and respect for people that run that dairy farm and raise me on that dairy farm. I really do believe that they love their animals and their herd, just like I did at that point in time, but they just haven't taken that next step and learned to act in favour of them. So, I first came across the Ravenclaw through volunteer work at Adelaide's Vegan Festival during October of 2018. I met Seth, who's over there in the crowd, the founder of Tofurky and chair of the Ravenclaw, through a mutual friend, and he expressed that Portland based his advocacy group was hoping to go international and asked whether I would be interested in being the first Australian representative, which, on learning of the values and beliefs of the organisation, I obviously accepted graciously. Since being involved, Claire and everyone within the group has been so supportive and welcoming from the get-go, and continues to go above and beyond to make sure everything runs smoothly from across the globe, which is pretty amazing. I've now set up a group in Adelaide consisting of around 10 people on a good day, who are both vegan and non-vegan, who want to make positive change within the world through our group compassion project, operation, sorry. So if anyone between the ages of 14 and 22 is interested in getting involved, I would definitely recommend it because it's been a really great experience. So my experience as a lead raven. So being the first international lead raven has been probably one of the most challenging yet rewarding experiences I've had. I would say that the biggest challenge would be simply planning and executing operations in a timely manner. Rather than feeling defeated when collaborations don't work out or operations feel like they're going nowhere, I've just learned to approach things from a different angle and not give up entirely, which I think is good for activism in general. As well as finances can also be an issue that limits our operations, but because of this we've just learnt to think really creatively during our planning phase, which is actually really good because we end up using a lot of recycled materials and doing things waste-free, which we like. So rewards. So I'd say that the greatest reward that's come from compassionate activism through the Ravenclaw has been the network. So through this kind of activism, I've made new friends, become even closer with old friends, and I now have a family in the US, which is pretty amazing. The Ravenclaw isn't just a group, we're like an international community that has a shared interest in promoting a plant-based lifestyle through good food and even better company. And it's pretty empowering to be able to create positive change all together. So onto operations. So the Ravenclaw complete activism through X Good
operations. So Ravenclaw of Adelaide has done numerous operations and has some that are ongoing and in the works. The most notable would be Project Feed the Needy. So this project is centred around providing hearty plant-based meals, centred around whole foods, complete proteins and plant-based carbohydrates to Adelaide's homeless and financially struggling population. Through this we wanted to try and alleviate some of the inevitable isolation that comes with being on the streets and over a meal, which is pretty good. Also Artivism with Sea Shepherd. So this project's set to commence late August and it aims to teach kids about the impacts of ocean pollution and the industries responsible. So we're basically leading the beach clean that will be followed by a shorefront arts workshop for kids. So another campaign that we're doing is supporting the Animal Justice Party in South Australia and RSPCA South Australia in their campaign to ban duck shooting. They're basically doing this just by encouraging Australians to voice their concern to the Premier, and hopefully with enough people voicing their concern, the coming duck shooting season won't arrive. So, my activism tips. So, as we all know, there's a lot of different forms of activism that exist in this day and age. Some that we could probably consider effective and some not so much, as discussed earlier. So, the activism I personally found to be the most effective through my journey as an activist would definitely be creativity, food, and just being inclusive of everyone. The Ravenclaw is an organisation that takes in all young people, regardless of their lifestyle choices, so whether you're vegan, non-vegan, or whatever. By doing this, we receive a lot more engagement with the ideas we put forward, and we don't become seen as separate from those with different beliefs, or exclusive. So, by letting people who aren't, the ideal vegan standard into our group, we provide them with the opportunity to develop a greater understanding of the movement and a respect for the movement that they might not have had previously. Also, people who become involved are generally compassionate people who already have a foundation, so just by being involved, they come to a vegan conclusion themselves with time. So, I've just got some slides of the people in my group who come from all different backgrounds and live all different lifestyles to show you. So we've got Ruby, she's been vegan for a year. We've got Ella, who's my weird vegan friend. Then we've got Phoebe, who's vegetarian, and Rosie, who's not vegan at all, but she's really trying to understand the movement and develop a greater knowledge of the perks of veganism, try all the junk food. She's always sending me photos of her eating vegan magnums and stuff, which is pretty cool. We've got Rachel and Indira. Yeah. And we're all very accepting of one another. And we can all sit at a table and get along regardless of our lifestyle choices, which is the aim. Cool. Creativity. So, also known as artivism, creativity is an extremely powerful form of advocacy. So, the arts are basically designed to engage as well as encourage thought within us as people. So, naturally, by pairing important messages with or through the arts, we're enhancing the appeal and effect of our advocacy, making it a really powerful tool. So, an example of this would be the Gerbs workshop that I ran through the Art Gallery of South Australia late last year. It's basically the same idea as the Sea Shepherd workshop. Kids using waste materials collected through beach cleans to create a junk bird. yeah, it was a really great way of starting conversation about issues of ocean pollution between participants and just waste in general. So food. So there's no denying everyone loves food. We all love food. So, and one of the greatest arguments against a vegan lifestyle is that, you know, I could never live without bacon or cheese, or that vegan foods are just leafy greens and they're boring and tasteless. So basically, by advocating through food, sharing food with people who don't live this lifestyle, we're basically curing this misconception, which is a big thing. So now, adult support. So the Raven Corps is different to most organisations in the way that the youth power is greater than the adult power. It's empowering to be able to work on operations independently and to not be seen as less than due to our age. Regardless, we love our adult support. Shout out to Seth, Claire, Will, and the rest of the gang. Your support is very much appreciated. So some of the key ways that adults can support young people in their advocacy include by sharing your network. So as young people, sometimes our connections can be quite limited. So if you have valuable connections or relevant connections that could help us in an operation, it's really helpful if you can share that with us. Financial support is also very helpful sometimes as a small organisation that's youth-led, youth-driven. It can be kind of hard to get finances sometimes, so adult allies can help out with that. And the most important one I would say would be listening. So most adults I've found do this quite effortlessly, and they love seeing the next generation advocating. Although there's definitely some individuals that think it's acceptable to disregard young people due to their lack of experience in the world. One of the greatest ways to support young people is just by hearing us, acknowledging we are capable, and encouraging our approach to advocacy. Just because our views don't necessarily align with your own doesn't mean that they're not valid. And yeah, so in conclusion, through practicing becoming a compassionate vegan and implementing the advocacy strategies that I've mentioned within this presentation into my life, I can safely say that I've become a far more effective activist than I was when I was an angry vegan that I was when I started out. And if you don't believe me, you can ask my family. So the same family that initially frowned upon my choice to pursue a vegan lifestyle during Christmas of 2017 actually held their very first entirely vegan Christmas during 2018. Pretty impressive, and it wasn't even my idea. It wasn't under protest, it was all arranged by them. So compassion really is the key. Don't be angry, just get along with everyone and be compassionate. Cool. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you very much for sharing your inspiring personal stories, your work with Raven Corps, and also I think it's very important that you're sharing an updated activism 101 lesson with all of us adult allies. But I do appreciate that. I think it was eye-opening for a lot of us sitting in the room, so thank you very much. I think due to time, what we'll do is they'll be up here to answer any questions because I know people are probably hungry to go have dinner. But why don't you give another plug on your workshop tomorrow so if people aren't staying around to ask questions tonight, they can come find you tomorrow. You want to give another plug of where it's at and what time, somebody?
Yeah, so, excuse me, I'm a little sick right now. I'm all right. Our workshop tomorrow will be in this room. It's at noon. It's all adult allies, all young people are welcome and encouraged to come. It's going to be educational and you will learn some new interesting topics involved with the Raven Corps. Thank you.
Awesome. Let's give these three young women another round of applause. Thank you very much.